Welcome to the People's Revolution podcast. This is a space where we share stories from activists around the world. We hope that these stories inspire you to act locally as we share globally.
I don't have a problem with you. This generation, look around, there's nothing left to do. Liberation, take one final step and then you'll see the complications. The system don't belong to you or me.
Welcome to the People's Revolution podcast. We're going to start today, as always, with a land acknowledgement. A recognition that we are on stolen land is not enough when the genocide we call history still continues today and is reinforced by the daily lives of those unaware. Residential schools only closed their last doors in 1997, but the mentality of the residential schools live on. White people, imagine living in a place that not only normalizes genocide, but actively covers it up. We don't live here because a peaceful treaty was signed. We live here because white people before us brutally pushed their way in. This includes our current government, RCMP, and church, and we need to acknowledge this and the harmful systems it brought with it before we can even attempt to create reconciliation. It is a privilege to not know that we are living in such a way that makes a genocidal reality seem like regular everyday life. I would still like to recognize that the stolen land I am speaking from is rightfully the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Nations and was forced to be the home of Treaty 7. These nations are Siksika, Kainai, and Piikani. In these spaces, the Siksika people lived and practiced their oral traditions as far back as existence goes. Treaty 7 was signed on September 22, 1877 in a brutally unethical way. This treaty was not upheld. Treaty 7 includes the Tsuut'ina Nation, the Stoney Nakoda Nations, and the Métis Nation of Region 3. So this space, known as Calgary, is rightfully known as Mohkinstsis. Thank you. So introducing the people for Reproductive Freedom and Choice, Kaylee, Erica, and Kayla. They're part of so many other cool projects in Edmonton, but today we'll focus on this one. I'd like to do a little introduction with everyone, and starting with Erica, if you maybe could just share some of your backstory, how you got into activism, what drives you, any of that you want to share or not.
Sure. So I started with activism when I think my first protest that I went to a slut walk, which was something that was held for a few years in Edmonton that was basically in protest of rape culture. I just slapped tape over my nipples and was like, I'm going to go do this. And I had never done it before. And so that's kind of how I started in activism. Since then, I did a few counter protests to the pro-life group at the U of A on campus. And then I really kind of started when the pandemic hit in 2020. February, I helped organize the counter protest to the Tiki Torch marches that were held by a bunch of white supremacists and far-right extremists that kind of came to Edmonton from all over Alberta. And that's how I met a lot of these lovely activists and kind of got swept up into the activist world of Alberta. Then I helped start and found a queer organization, a queer support, and called Pride Corner on White, which is basically counter-protesting religious street preachers that preach hate and harassment towards the queer community. And then I started with these two lovely folks, People for Reproductive Freedom Choice.
Awesome. Your work is so necessary. And I went to that protest. Fuck those Tiki Torch bitches.
Oh my
God. Kaylee, I will pass the torch off to you. I didn't mean that as a pun, but it kind of was fine. So.
Oh, that was perfect.
That was good.
Hello. It's so nice to be here. My name is Kaylee, and how I got into activism was just chance of coincidence. I had my own story of recovery, and once I was able to start to give back to the community, I started volunteering with the unhoused community. And just giving back in a general sense in activism, I find that it's very easy to do activism in a role sense, but activism in everyday life, I think, is really where the change is. As far as public activism goes and being able to do organizations and be able to meet fellow activists, just Kayla, Erica, even Pride Corner, it's truly amazing. I also share a very similar story where I had been doing smaller activities behind the scenes, and then the pandemic had hit, and we had all been put into a position where it had enforced people from the far right extremist community to come in public. So we had done the Tiki Torch March, which was quite an event. It also opened me up to introductions of all these wonderful people. And so then my activism in Alberta really started to begin. And I've been doing a lot of things behind the scenes, such as protesting for the LGBTQ2 plus community, working within the unhoused community, and now most recently, People for Reproductive Freedom and Choice, which is such a blessing.
Awesome. Thank you. And finally, Kayla.
Perfect. Hi. So my name is Kayla, and I think that for me, activism started at a really young age. When I was 8, I had found out that I had a friend who wasn't getting very much for Christmas, and sorry, there's a truck. And so I decided that I was going to work with Canadian Tire and Santa's Anonymous, and I raised money and they would match it, and I'd buy toys for underprivileged children. I did that until I was like 16. And then after that, I had decided that I wanted to become a social worker. So when I turned 18, I had to do my volunteer hours, and I chose to do them with high-risk youth. So I stayed there for 2 years after I completed my hours. And then as I entered the program, I had a professor tell me that to be a social worker is to be an activist, even though you could be an activist without being a social worker. And I found that to be very true. I've done a lot of things behind the scenes like the others mentioned, but it all kicked off in the pandemic, likewise for me too. And with the Tiki Torch marches, I was a part of counter-protesting that, and as well as speaking at the Justice for Paso event and doing some other events for a fight for equity. And then since then, we founded the People for Reproductive Freedom and Choice, which has been amazing.
Yes. Yeah, I'm very excited to dive into that. You guys have done a lot in a very short period of time, so we have a lot to get into. First of all, People for Reproductive Freedom and Choice, deeply committed to making change and advocating for people's rights, stand in solidarity of all uterus having people. I love the way you guys word things. I do. Does anyone want to chime in and just share a little bit more about your guys' organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So reproductive rights is something that I've held closely to myself, and I can almost vouch that the others would say the same. And when the Roe v. Wade leaked document had occurred, we had all gotten together almost immediately, and we sat down and we were like, what do we need to do? And how do we start? And immediately we started running off ideas. We started discussing how we were going to make an impact within the community and stand in solidarity of not only with the United States, but tabling reproductive rights within Alberta itself, as reproductive rights are actively being attacked in Alberta, just as it were to be in the US. But yeah, I will pass that mic along to one of the other lovely founders.
Yeah, so we, like Kaylee mentioned, we all got together. The name took a little bit of teasing out. It is quite lengthy, but I feel like it really encompasses kind of what we do. It's not for abortion rights that we advocate for is for reproductive freedom. And those two things are different when you're talking and involving intersectionality, such as trans rights. You know, it's not just abortions that Planned Parenthood provide. It's all sorts of level of reproductive health. And what is important for us is just maintaining the choice that we, you know, if you live in an urban place, are lucky to have. I had an abortion myself when I was 22, and I would make that choice again and again because it was the one that was right for me. And I had very little barriers. I was lucky to have almost no barriers to my abortion, but that can't be said for people that live in rural Alberta. That can't be said for people who are, you know, unhoused or are low income. There are truly so many barriers. There is 4.4 million people in Alberta, I believe, and only 5 clinics that provide abortions. So taking time off work, so many people can't do that. There are all these things that the Conservatives and the UPP and the federal Conservatives are trying to erode and make it even harder for people to obtain abortions and to get really high quality reproductive care. So our organization is, yes, we do hold rallies, and we've hosted 2 very successful ones in Edmonton, but we're not just stopping there. We do want to address kind of federal and provincial law, working with other organizations in the province and across the country. And, you know, just if the reality happens that the Conservatives are voted in federally, it's such a hot button issue. It always is, but of course, with Roe being overturned in the States, it's even more so. People are really amped up about this right now, and it could be something that, you know, Canadians very realistically could face here. So those are just some of the things that we want to address.
Yeah, that's actually a good thing to jump into now. What kind of legislature or issues are coming up in our current UCP government that we think that people should be aware of? Kaylee, you're nodding, so I'm going to pass that to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Specifically, one of the problematic candidates for the UCP government is Todd Loewen. We are aware that there are other UCP members who are pro-life. Actually, pro-life is not the right word, it's forced birth. And who behind the scenes are very much supporters of the forced birth movement, but specifically Todd Loewen, who has publicly went and declared that if he were to be elected premier, he would be taking away the bubble bill, which protects reproductive clinics that nobody, including us, far-right forced birth believers, can protest within 50 meters of the abortion clinic itself. And he has talked very clearly, and he has expressed that he believes that people should have the right to protest within the 50 meters of the clinics, and has talked about uplifting that law. So that is one of them. I would also like to say that even when Stephen Harper was in a federal position, there were bills that were passed to restrict reproductive rights. A lot of these didn't get passed, but they were processed. And I think that it is happening in Alberta, but it's not as public as it were to be in the United States right now. But yeah, I'm going to also pass that mic off to my lovely co-founders, because I know that they also have some really valid information about the UCP government that we have in power right now.
Yeah, I just want to add in there that as well, it seems to be more so of a culture of the UCP party, as even when the Roe v. Wade was first being discussed, there weren't any members except for later on Leela Ayer, who had stood up and said that women's reproductive rights should be followed. Everyone else kept their mouth shut and followed the party line, so to speak. So I think that it's not so much just one person, but also just the whole system in general.
Absolutely. Kayla, can you talk a little bit about the letters that we had sent out to the UCP regarding our rallies?
Yeah, when we had been planning our rallies, we had reached out to all of the MLAs in Alberta, and we invited them to come and stand with us and to publicly affirm the reproductive freedom and choice. And some of them responded. Everyone gave pretty words, but no one showed up.
Yeah, not surprising, but still disappointing.
Absolutely not.
Very disappointing. Erica, is there anything that you want to add, maybe about the people affected, or again, just what's going on with the UCP?
I mean, I think that they hit it pretty well. It is, like Kayla mentioned, just really a lot about the culture, that there is no individuality. And we can say that about a lot of our political parties. But there's that federal, he is, of course, a young white man that is a federal conservative, Oosterhoffen or something like that, who is very, has made it his mission to ban abortion. He's bringing all sorts of bills constantly federally to be passed, to erode in a lot of backdoor ways, and they do end up in some ways coming through. Like the legislation that passed that abortion clinics have to have hallways that are a certain width. That closed so many abortion clinics because they had to, quote unquote, fit a gurney down the abortion hallway clinics. And sorry, I just got a call there. That forced so many to be closed. When that was passed federally, a lot of clinics didn't meet those credentials, and so therefore were forced to close. So when they're not maybe outright saying that, we are anti-choice and we are forced first, they are doing it in a lot of these backdoor ways that makes the abortion super hard. So it's not just, we can't just look at sorry, what was the name of the guy that just lost the election of the UCP?
Todd Lowen, or
no, federally they pushed him out.
Sorry, his name's escaping me too.
Yeah, but they pushed him out because he was too centrist. He said he was pro-choice, and the feds were like, absolutely not. Is someone who publicly says they're pro-choice going to be the leader of the federal conservative? So it is, like Kayla mentioned, just a lot of following the party lines.
Mm-hmm. And so you guys held 2 rallies, one before Roe versus Wade was overturned and one after. The one before was on CTV news. It was on some other news stations too, but I think that was the best one. So I'll just play that clip here.
Abortion rights advocates rallied at the Alberta legislature Sunday.
Everyone deserves the right for health care, and abortion is health care.
It's really important that everyone has access. Otherwise, people are going to be experiencing unsafe conditions when they're trying to abort pregnancies on their own, or if they have to experience a pregnancy that is unwanted.
Millions of women south of the border are on the verge of losing access to abortion after a U.S. Supreme Court ruling was leaked that would overturn abortion rights, creating conversation around the world.
How America and Canada are so close. A lot of us are scared that it's going to take some of our reproductive rights as well.
Alberta's health minister was asked late last week if there are any plans to improve access to abortion services in rural Alberta.
AHS is the one that makes the decisions of what services will be provided and where based on the demand, and they had no plans to be able to. They had no plans to increase the current level of service that abortions are provided.
Alberta's opposition NDP condemns what is happening in the U.S. and wants the Alberta government to publicly declare its support for women's reproductive rights.
The government should make sure that they recognize that abortion is health care and that public health care should be available to every Albertan no matter where they live, and we should be taking down barriers.
In Edmonton, Laura Kraus, City News.
So what did you guys feel like after you had finished your first rally? Maybe starting with Kayla?
Yeah, I remember feeling very empowered, uplifted. I felt like it was successful, and I felt so honored to be able to help hold that space for everyone to come together and for us all just to feel our emotions and express ourselves as a whole community.
Awesome. Maybe Erica? Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, in classic activist fashion, we whipped together that protest in like 4 days because, it's not like we are graced with a bunch of time to deal with these things. And that was a really big issue in the news at the time. So we knew we had to kind of harness all of the energy and all of the emotions that were being elicited from just the general public and act on that. So yeah, we threw that thing together in 4 days. We had, I think at that one, about 200 people, maybe like 150 to 200 show up. It was really great. It was just really powerful to host a space for people to come and share how they're feeling about this. Just all three of us, we made speeches and just bared our souls, and that is really cathartic when you're in an environment with a bunch of people who are also really passionate about this. So yeah, I felt super empowered. I was exhausted. Frontline activism is really exhausting, and you do need to make sure that you take care of yourself after. But yeah, it was amazing.
Mm-hmm. And finally, Kaylee, do you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, as they had said, I believe that they covered, sorry, like a lot of the major importance. But yeah, basically we had all heard about the news, and I think it was like within a matter of 10 to 15 minutes, I picked up the phone. I was like, hey, y'all, what are we gonna do? Like, it is happening, and we don't have time. And part of that process of starting to set up the event, we had looked into the resources that were currently being accessible in Alberta and the other grassroots organizations. We were able to meet a lot of wonderful people who are also founders of Reproductive Freedoms in Alberta. But unfortunately, reproductive rights is not something that has been well advocated for in Alberta. The people who have done reproductive rights have done an amazing job, but the resources are so few, unfortunately. And I found it even more troubling that the pro-life enforced birth movement was so large in Alberta, and the fact that we were outnumbered. So I think specifically starting up this rally had brought in all these factors that it wasn't just going to stop here. And it had really ignited us to take a good look at what was accessible in Alberta and what definitely was not accessible in Alberta. And just as Erica had said, and Kayla as well, like our most vulnerable communities, including our Indigenous communities throughout rural Alberta, low-income communities, the unhoused communities, people who can't take time off of work, because in reality, you have to come to a city like Edmonton or Calgary to access reproductive freedoms. And unfortunately, a lot of people are unable. So I really think that this protest really had started all of this off, and I'm just so blessed that we were able to participate and lead that event. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm going to drop that mic. Thank you.
Yeah, it looked great. I liked there was a picture of the week on LGBT Nation. It was from your guys' rally. I love that. I'll put it up. And then, so after that rally, Roe v. Wade was overturned, and I read all your guys' statements on Facebook. It was really heartfelt. And then, so you again held a second rally on July 3rd. And a video of that rally is actually available on Facebook. I will link it below if you want to watch it. I cried. You can cry. it'll be it'll be good. And let's talk about that rally, because it was very powerful, and there was a lot of, I think, really heavy hitting speakers. I won't speak more on it. I'll let you guys speak on it. Kayla, could I tap you back in for that?
Yeah. With that rally, I think that we felt a little bit, we had more time to prepare for it. So we were able to really delve into everything that we wanted to see and had a little bit more time. There was a little less pressure compared to when we had held our first rally to get everything done to respond as quickly as possible. So I think that it went really, really well. We had so many great speakers who had came and shared their stories. And, you know, even when we did have that one naysayer, you know, and things had started to get escalated, things were brought back down under control. And, you know, other than that, it was just a beautiful experience. And like we had said, it was just so empowering, and just to hear so many different perspectives from everyone. It was just so beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Erica, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, that second rally was, man, that's like my child. I'm so proud of that one. We had 7 days to get ready for that one, so that yeah, I think that we really wanted, and we will continue to do and focus on racialized voices within all of this. We all know that in so many aspects of society, people of color are who are going to feel those effects to a much greater degree. So we really wanted to focus on having speakers within those realms and making sure that we had just a very wide range of perspectives. And I think we did that really well. I would really encourage everyone to go and listen to it. It is about an hour and a half, but some of the speeches are just perspectives that need to be in the public sphere. They were, I was blown away by our speakers. We were super lucky to round up who we did. And, there is just something to be said for walking in the streets together. Like, it is fucking powerful. I think that event had more like 400 to 500 people show up. It was, just people care about this. We wanted to come together, and we took to the streets. We took over a whole lane of Jasper Avenue. We got a ton of support from people driving by, and we made our presence known. Like, we made ourselves super known. All the media outlets came to interview us and just take some footage, and we got a really positive response. And it was just, personally, it was a super emotional day. It was, I'm really proud of that event.
Kaylee, do you have some final words on this, or any words? They don't have to be final words.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that the other co-founders have touched on some really important topics, but I'm just going to also throw in there that we were able to bring Alberta together. And I can speak for myself, and I can speak for a couple more people, that even weeks after the event, my fire was still going. I still feel the strong emotions that had occurred when I had first been able to see how the event was going in the first place, and be able to see how successful it was coming together. I think more specifically, we were able to bring more attention to the problematic issues within Alberta itself. And I can speak for our group and the other groups who protested throughout Alberta, that we were able to help bring Albertans together. And we were able to educate them in a base that was inclusive and that fought for equity. Specifically, what Erica had said as well is that we are here to uplift racialized voices and voices of even in the LGBTQ2 plus community. As a non-binary person, I feel as representation is extremely important. And I think it's extremely important to be inclusive in the language that we use, in the proactive stance that we use to be able to include people's voices from all walks of life. And I believe that we were very successful in that. And again, I would also like to acknowledge that not all women have uteruses, and not all uterus people having people are women. And I think that we were really able to embrace the community in such a proactive way that made people feel included. And I think that in Alberta, we need that. Unfortunately, we live in a conservative province. Unfortunately, we live in a province where far-right extremists are extremely prominent, and that movements that are actually physically oppressing people are currently happening in Alberta. And I just think that it was really amazing that we were able to come together and make this amazing event that made people feel included and safe and welcomed and united as a collective group of activists. So yeah, that's all I really have to say about that. And yeah,
your guys' speaker lineup was like perfect. Like it was beautiful, and the video was, you guys got to check out the video. And even like there was pictures. I think the person that took them, that really blonde human, their pictures were phenomenal. I'll include some here also.
Yeah, capture moment.
Oh, sorry, it kind of cut out. What did you say?
Oh, I just said that our photographer that we've been lucky to have at all of our events they capture moments, and it really is those that we can look back on that are super powerful and lasting. So yeah, we're very lucky to have that really blonde human.
Yes. Yeah. And definitely. So you guys are going to keep going with the rallies, is that right? Or tentatively?
We have been in the midst of talking about how we are going to move forward and be more proactive within the community in Alberta. We still have yet to release some of this information that we have been talking about, but I would like to affirm to Alberta that we will be going forward and being active within the community. Stay tuned for some future events, which you can find on our Facebook page, People for Reproductive Freedom and Choice, which
I'll link the Facebook below and your website below, and all the videos that we talk about today will also be linked below.
So sorry if I can just cut in for
yes, please.
Working, sorry. For further events, like we may not always be hosting, massive rallies, but we are staying relevant within the community of holding counter protests. Holding our own is obviously super important, but we have to also let anti-choicers know, like Kaylee mentioned, are very prominent. Let them know that they are not unopposed, that truly the majority of people do want to see reproductive choice and reproductive freedom. It's just that with everything, these people are very loud and they make themselves seem a lot more prominent than they actually are. So counter-protesting their events is something that's really important to us. We do have a church group that continuously harasses people trying to access services at the Women's Health Clinic on 124th Street in Edmonton here. So we counter-protest them. And that just involves holding signs and playing music, which is like super, it's a big deterrent to them. And that's something that we place importance on because, they can't go around thinking that their views are acceptable.
Yes. And that actually perfectly leads into the next part I want to talk about. You guys did a counter protest to the Gala for Life, which I think is important to talk about because they had a lot of funders. And on that funding list was the Catholic School Board trustees. So that's pretty fucked up. And is concerning. And they had like a whole fucking like dinner gala, and it pisses me off. But it probably pisses you guys too. So I will, maybe Erica, do you want to touch on that?
Oh, I'm going to pass that off to one of my co-founders because I wasn't actually able to be present.
Okay. Yeah. Kaylee, do you want to give it a go?
All right. Yeah, absolutely. I think that the event was extremely powerful. We definitely made a point by being there and present with our signs and our music and our conversations. We had several different conversations, but not only with the people who were hosting the event, but who were present at the event. And hosting, I mean the people who own the Edmonton Inn Conference, the specific manager who runs the building within itself. It was very concerning. We have the list of sponsors on our Facebook page that you can go and look at as well. And it was extremely concerning to see how many people were able to fund a gala of 1,000 seats. And that is only in Edmonton and within Alberta. And I think even more prominent is that some of the people that we saw within that lineup have assaulted youth who have been involved in far-right extremists, including white nationalists, and people who have been within the community who have clearly stated oppositional views which oppress people. And we really wanted to make sure that they were aware that we are aware and that they will not be able to protest against our reproductive rights silently. And I definitely feel as if we accomplished that. I'm going to pass that one also off to Kayla so she can fill in a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thanks. Also, I think that was concerning was the people in the political world that attended the event, as these are the people that are, pushing forward these bills and motions. And also the people you surround yourself by are who you are. And I think it was very concerning just the way in which a lot of the people who were attending the event, when you asked them questions or they approached us, it wasn't as though they were truly thinking for themselves or having that education piece and being resistant to being educated. And when you tie all of that into politics, that's exactly how we get into these types of positions with rights being restricted. But other than that, I think that the event went well. We did have some good conversations there, and I think that a lot of the safety risks that we've seen at previous events were pretty much minimalized there. And after we left, it felt pretty successful. They still had their evening, but we did get to show up and show them that we weren't going to sit by while they just do these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Definitely. And I'm sure they'll do it again. So please, everyone listening, keep a lookout for the counter protests for that in your area and on their Facebook page, which again is linked below. Mm-hmm. And you guys did another counter protest because there was I think it was called Drag Queen Storytime, that a library had booked, and there was a counter protest to that, and you guys were the counter protest. And so there is actually a pretty good global news clip that I'll play right now.
Protesters with signs abruptly entered the downtown library Saturday morning to interrupt an event.
We got drag queens reading inappropriate books to our children. You don't need to read them Dr. Seuss. Read them Green Eggs and Ham.
The Stanley A. Milner Library held a drag queen storybook reading for parents and their children. Those who went inside opposed to the reading eventually took their protest outside. They were met with crowds of people from the LGBTQ community playing music and dancing.
They were basically saying that we as the queer community and drag queens are sexualizing drag, and they're saying that we are preying on children and that it's predatory.
Something MLA and critic for the status of women and 2S LGBTQ+ issues Janice Irwin says is not the case.
There was a lovely drag queen named Felicia Bonet. I went in there, I heard the stories, they were beautiful, they were lovely. So many kids and families that were that just really enjoyed it.
But these protesters don't see it that way.
Why do the children need to know that? They don't need to know that. They don't even know what clothes they're going to put on for the day, never mind what sexuality they're going to be.
Regardless of opinion, Irwin says the actions demonstrated could have been done in a better way.
They're welcome to protest. They absolutely are. That's their right. I would ask them to do it respectfully because it wasn't fully respectful today.
Protesters say as long as the readings continue, they will be back. And if that's the case, so will song and dance brought on by crowds of people in the LGBTQ community.
I don't really understand the hate and the anger, but, you know, I send them love, and that's the message I sent to some of them who were in my face earlier.
Waskahikan, Global News.
And so, Kaylee, I really liked what you said in the news clip, because it seems to be such a misconception that like what is happening inside the library is like indoctrination, which like it's not. It's just teaching people different social norms, which is just like so important because it just confuses people less. I really hate how they barged into the library while it was happening. But I'll pass it off to Erica because I know you have to go soon, and I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah. I just have a couple of comments about that because my worlds kind of overlapped, and that Pride Corner was also present. And then also we just had a really great outpouring of support from the general community. There were people there that we had never seen before, but a really nice thing that happened that I got a lot of messages on our Pride Corner Instagram about was from adults who had brought children to the story time reading. And when the counter protesters barged in, we were right on their tails and just started clapping and like cheering, so that it was super minimized the effect for the children. They just kind of saw people cheering and then they started cheering. So I had a lot of messages through the Pride Corner of adults just being like, thank you for being there, because my children had no idea that there was any sort of animosity going on. They had the best day. They loved the drag queen and how, you know, glamorous they were. And so that was something that was really nice. Like, we cannot negate how effective it is to just play music, dance, do our thing. And it super dissuades and like detracts from any of these angry white supremacist homophobic assholes. Like, they can't handle it, and it's chef's kiss. Well, because I pretty soon this wasn't publicized, but I just wanted to throw in there that a group of 17 of us there was a large rally called March for Life that happens annually at the legislature. They bus students in from out of town to attend this super indoctrinated event led by priests and pastors that is super anti-choice. The rhetoric is alarming. They're holding all sorts of offensive signs, inaccurate statements, and education is said at those. And so like 17 of us just plopped ourselves right in the middle of those 400 people, and we did our thing. We played music and you couldn't even hear their speakers. It was beautiful. It was one of the best days of the summer for me. And so yeah, like it's important to do these things. It's super important. And anyone that wants to join us, please do follow our Facebook and Instagram, because the more the merrier. And yeah, we have a real voice and we have a real way to dissuade these people, and we should take every chance we can get.
Yes. Yeah, that is so important. Thank you. I know you have to go, so we can let you go if you'd like, but thank you so much. And I'm sure we'll talk soon.
Yeah, thanks so much for including us. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Bye, Erica.
Bye, Erica.
Bye.
Love you.
And so to continue on with the counter to the drag queen story time, Kaylee, did you want to maybe share your thoughts on there? Again, I loved your thoughts in the news. It was just super important for people to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I was the team lead peacekeeper at the original event. We had all gathered there as a collective group of activists. And so it was really amazing to be able to see everybody take a piece of knowledge and to be able to share that with the people who are present there. Specifically, I know that I had several difficult conversations with the people who were present. As a peacekeeper, it is in my morals to be able to sit there and actually have conversations and understand why people are there. And unfortunately, there were claims that the drag queens were pedophilia, that they are grooming children, that we are indoctrinating our children, and that we are just extremely hateful claims and inappropriate claims and false claims. Specifically with the drag queen story time, what we made sure to do was be there in support of the drag queen story time, not just specifically counter protest the people who had originally started the event itself. I think a lot of it was intimidation based on their part. There were known white supremacists, far-right extremists. A lot of these people have been in public accountings, and the event wasn't there to peacefully protest drag queen story time. It was there to spread hate and fear in our community. It was an event of oppression, transphobia, hate, and anything under that radar. And so being able to stand there and stand together as the LGBTQ2+ community was powerful like nothing else. I had quite a few difficult conversations. There were points of escalation, as you would expect when people from the far-right extremists are present at an event. And specifically, it's unfortunately ended in pieces of just pure hate and violence. And so being the peacekeeper, the team lead peacekeeper, I made sure that the event was secure and that people were allowed to be able to peacefully protest within the LGBTQ2+ community. And I feel as if we were able to accomplish that. We had an amazing group of people show up, people who I have protested with for years and I love dearly. And they all just did such an amazing job. And like Pride Corner was there. I freaking love Pride Corner. They are such a great group of people and they did such great, they just, yeah, it was amazing. Just like Erica said, like people reaching out and confirming that we just did such an amazing job and that we were able to set an example for our youth that we won't be stepped down by hate, and being able to, unfortunately, they were exposed to what it is like to be targeted for being queer and for being who you are. And yeah, it was really good to hear also from Erica that people from the protest who had attended, that it had positively impacted them and their beliefs and their stance in Alberta. And yeah, and so that was the first drag queen story time. And then we had our second event. And I'm going to pass that mic off to Kayla because she might have something to add, but I know that she has a lot of information about the second event that we had.
Yeah, thank you. So with the second event, I had arrived and just immediately there's this feeling that things just weren't right. And as an activist, it's really important that you trust yourself in those feelings. Overall, the event had gone well, but there had been some individuals who had arrived when I did, and I had noticed them, and they had been circling the event, but they didn't park, and they didn't directly engage. But Kaylee and I had been peacekeeping, so we were doing security surveillance labs, and we had spotted them, and they hadn't left or done anything except watch. as the event drew closer to an end, they had moved from the further outskirts of the parking lot where they were waiting to closer to where the group was and where the drag queens would be leaving. We noticed that, and then when it came time to leave, these individuals had tried to follow some people, so we had to do some security measures to make sure that everybody who was going to be leaving could do so safely. We had, at one point, we had thought they had left, and we had discovered that they were just waiting around a corner, blocking an exit where we couldn't see. So it was very like aggressive type and organized moves that these people were making, as opposed to just like some ignorant bigot just shouting their love Alberta, hatred stuff, the angry Albertan type. So we all managed to leave, but when I had left, I was driving, and there had been a truck that had pulled out erratically at a parking lot a little ways from where the library, where the event was, and they were following me, and they were driving aggressively. So I tried switching lanes, and so did they. And we did that a few times as we were driving down the White Mountain until eventually we were side by side. And that's when I glanced over, and it was two men, early 30s, and they were filming and yelling things. And then I accelerated, so did they. Eventually ended up losing them. And it was after that Kaylee and I had heard some news that we had been doxxed by the Sons of Odin, the Proud Boys, and some neo-Nazis. Which I think just highlights how much the importance of activism is, but there are dangers as well. And while everybody should be encouraged to get involved and to do the activism working in the community, it is something that we all need to be aware of so we aren't overwhelmed if these types of things do happen. And also just to, keep that vigilance up about your own personal security and the security of people that you're with.
Yeah, that's absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, it really was. But yeah, just always keep your eyes open and trust your instincts, I would say.
Yeah, I'm glad that you guys had everything on lock, that you knew what to do in terms of peacekeeping and security, that you kept everyone else safe, but I'm still very sorry that happened to you. Alberta has a lot of fuckheads, and they involve themselves in so much weird shit. But being chased on the road is scary as fuck.
Absolutely.
I think I said fuck like 5 times in that. That is upsetting.
And since then, also, this hate has followed through to other parts of the community. And I am personally not involved with those groups, so I will not speak too much on their experience, but they have been victims of acts of hate, which have grown from these protests. And as a community, and as myself, a non-binary queer individual who is very prominent within the community, I feel as if it's easy to remember why we do this in the first place, and why we are out there fighting for our rights, because they are actively trying to oppress us and take away our safety, our rights. And it's nothing new. This has been happening for centuries and centuries and centuries, and I'm so proud that in 2022 we are able to group together as a collective group of activists and stand up and let people know why we are doing this in the first place. And the response from the community has been so amazing. And we are a collective group of activists, and we stand together. And I think that it is so beautiful to be able to see the community that we've been able to build. And I just wanted to acknowledge that as well quickly, and just remind people that we have been fighting this fight, and we are going to continue to fight this fight. And I will continue to put myself on the front line. I can only speak for myself, but I can vouch that I will continue to be an activist within Alberta, despite what these happenings are. And yeah, I'm gonna put that mic down. Thank you for allowing me to speak again.
Yeah, these are really important and heavy points. Like, when you go up against hate, you're not going up against just like some fuck that's yelling at you, and unfortunately you're going up against those fucks and then all the hate groups that go along with them. And it sucks that it's like all in one. Like, it's just such a big problem. How do you deal with it? But I know we stand up for ourselves, and we're here for ourselves, and we're here for each other, and we're just gonna keep doing that because it obviously pisses people off. So
Absolutely, well said.
do you want to add anything else before I move sections?
I can't.
No, I think I'm good.
I feel like that was a very heavy topic. I don't just want to be like, next. I want to.
I feel, yeah. No, I think that was pretty good. I'm trying to think of it, if there was anything. I think it was just really assertive, and I feel as if I got my point across at least.
What do you think that people should be most aware of? I guess with like all of this encompassed, not just the anti, like the transphobic fucks, but like all of this in total. Like, what do you think that people in Alberta, or just everyone listening, should be most aware of? Maybe starting with Kayla.
Yeah, I think that for people living in Alberta, the most important thing is to be aware of is that these are issues that are happening in our province and in our country. If we could look at the reproductive freedom and choice, you know, Roe v. Wade doesn't exist in a vacuum. And a lot of our laws have been based on laws that have followed similarly to the States or England or where have you. So like with things like this happen, the anti-choice and forced further people, they were excited about seeing Roe v. Wade be overturned. And it, like, you know, it lit their fires to how can we make this happen here. So even if we're not necessarily hearing it on the news, or people aren't coming out and being like, no more abortions, these plans and actions are still being had. One of the things that was advertised for the For Life Gala there was that they were talking about exciting new developments into the political world. And, you know, that means they want to somehow pass legislation to restrict people's access to abortion. And I think more so also what we need to do is get more proactive about ensuring that our rights and freedoms of choice are enshrined through Canada Health Act, so that we can make sure that those protections are enshrined and that governments can't come into power and take those things away arbitrarily.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it is a lot to think about. Like the anger is definitely valid. That's another thing I think too, like when people see these protests and counter protests, like we're pissed, and we're rightly pissed, and we're going to stay pissed until it's fixed. Especially living in Alberta, like what the fuck is going on here? But do you guys see an end to these issues in Alberta? Maybe starting with Kaylee.
No, never. I think that the fight is consistent and will always be a fight. It's not, I would say it's, I know war is a really strong word, but we are in constant battle. And I think that we will have to continue to stand up for our rights, unfortunately, especially in Alberta, which also brings me to another point that I just want to remind people that you have the power to vote. You have a say in what happens in our country and within our province. Yes. And, you know, even we've, in our People for Reproductive Freedom and Choice, we were able to be present and gifted by the NDP. And we had fellow representatives and MLAs come and show their support. And the election is coming. It is just around the corner. And I just like, I was thinking about this the other day ago, is like, there's a lot of people who do not vote. And by not voting, you are putting not only your rights in dangers, but all of ours. And like, we got that power. And I just want to remind people that. And yeah, that's my last word on that though.
Yeah, and just to add in, I think like Kaylee was saying, I don't think that nobody just gives anybody rights. It's something that we always have to fight for to earn, which it should be given, but it's not, and to maintain. I'm sure that those who had been proponents for Roe v. Wade had thought that this was all said and done then, but here we are, 2022, and we're having these same conversations. And so I think that something that can happen is that we get a little comfortable with what we have, and instead of looking more at the bigger picture and making sure our things are enshrined and permanently so, until we get those things done, I think we're always going to need to keep the pressure on and to keep fighting so we can fight towards equality for all.
So how can people help or get involved that maybe don't want to jump right into counter protesting or even protesting? Maybe starting with Kaylee.
Absolutely. Two of my favorite words is difficult conversations and challenging the environment around you. A lot of activism is done front lines, but a majority of it is done behind the lines, the parts that we don't see, the parts that aren't on Facebook, the parts that aren't just in the counter protesting and in the rallies. It's a lot of what we do in our own lives. And I think that challenging your beliefs and having challenged the beliefs of the people around you and setting healthy boundaries and communicating and having, I know it's sometimes difficult to have conversation, because when you set healthy boundaries with people who don't have healthy boundaries, they act in the state of anger, which is a secondary emotion to fear and humiliation. And being able to challenge yourself to be able to have those difficult conversations, I think, is one of the most beautiful things I know. And I think that frontline activism is scary. And I know that from my experience, it isn't all rainbows, and it's scary. And I know that we as experienced leaders and peacekeepers are working every single day to improve the safety of the collective group of activists that we protest within. And I just it's challenging your environment, like I had said before. And yeah, I think that also just admitting that, I know for myself in the past times that I've tried to educate myself, to admit that I don't know everything. And I am humble enough to know that there's always room for improvement. And to being able to allow myself for that feedback, I think, is also a really important part of activism, is being able to build a wealth of knowledge so we can all coincide in a group of eclectic understanding and emotions and feelings, and being able to allow ourselves to build those type of environments.
Yeah. Kayla, is there anything you wanted to add to that? Just how can people help or get involved?
Yeah, I think that obviously we love to see everybody coming out to the events and counter protesting with us, but we know that it's not always possible for people to be there physically. But something that always helps is liking, sharing events on social media, getting as much reach as possible. And another thing is that when it comes to organizing events and working in and with the community, there's a lot that goes on, as Kaylee was saying, behind the scenes. So, you might be really good at something like website design or IT or anything. just anything that you might be good at, always send us a message, reach out if you want to help. And we're always open to having those conversations and getting to know a little bit more about you, and maybe there's something that you can help us with.
Perfect. My last question, let's start with Kaylee and then Kayla. What is your final statement for the people?
For the people, I think just as a personal message is I just want to say how proud I am for community. I think through the time that we've started even just this podcast and being able to reflect on the amazing things that we've been able to accomplish as a collective group of activists is truly just beautiful. And I just want to share how much I love our community. And yeah, I think also as a side note for that, to kind of finish off this interview, is just that we will continue to fight for our rights, and we will be continuing to fight this battle. And yeah, I'm gonna leave that there. Thank you for asking. I really appreciate it.
Yes. Kayla.
Yeah, I just want to say, thanks so much for the time. Thank you everyone for listening to us and spending the last hour and a half or so hearing what we have to say. And I think that it's just really honoring and humbling to be able to have the privilege to talk with you all. And like Kaylee said, we're going to continue to fight for our rights. And we hope that you're able to join us and do it too.
Yes. Yeah, so links to the website, Facebook, Instagram below. Of course, all the videos we watched today and the pictures from that really blonde human. Thank you again, and I super appreciated this conversation.
Thank you. It was great talking to you.
Thanks, y'all. So much love.
Cut.
Bye.